I will never stop praying for a miracle, because miracles do happen. As a pastor, I've seen thousands of miracles, physical miracles. I've seen many, many miracles. So I know they happen.
For decades, Pastor Rick Warren inspired millions with his sermons, books, and leadership. But now, shocking headlines claiming Pastor Rick Warren's sentence is final, goodbye forever, have left many people confused and searching for answers. Is this really the end of his public ministry? Or is there more to the story than the rumors suggest? Join us in this video as we separate facts from speculation, uncover what really happened, and explore how one of America's most influential pastors reached this unexpected moment. Stay with us as the full story unfolds. The goodbye that left millions. Reflecting. The words goodbye forever can sound heartbreaking, especially when they are connected to someone who has spent decades guiding millions of people. That is exactly how many felt when Pastor Rick Warren stepped onto the stage at Saddleback Church to deliver his final sermon as senior pastor. For many watching, it felt like the end of an incredible chapter that had shaped Christian ministry around the world. The atmosphere inside the California church was emotional from the very beginning. As Rick Warren walked toward the wooden pulpit, where he had preached during the first 15 years of his ministry, the congregation greeted him with loud applause and cheers. Before saying a single word, he paused, lowered his head for a few quiet moments, and simply took it all in. It was more than a stage. It was the place where countless lives had been changed over the last 43 years. Looking at the crowd, Warren smiled as emotions began to show on his face. "You're going to make me cry," he said. Then he added something that reflected the deep bond he had built with his church family over the years. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" Everyone knew this day would be different. This was not another Sunday message. It was the final time Rick Warren would stand before Saddleback Church as its lead pastor after more than 4 decades of leadership. Instead of talking about his achievements or sharing memories from his long ministry, he chose to return to the very message that started everything. He reminded the congregation that serving as their pastor had been one of the greatest privileges of his life. For 43 years, he had prayed with families, stood beside hospital beds, comforted people at gravesides, counseled those facing painful seasons, celebrated joyful moments, and faithfully taught God's Word week after week. During those years, Warren preached more than 6,500 sermons, Bible studies, and messages. With such a large collection to choose from, many expected him to deliver one final message filled with highlights from his ministry. Instead, he surprised everyone. He explained that out of every sermon he had ever preached, he had chosen to repeat the very first one. Not a revised version, not an updated message. The exact sermon he delivered 43 years earlier when Saddleback Church had not even been officially established. His decision reflected one of the values that had guided both his life and the church from the very beginning. Begin with the end in mind. Warren explained that purpose-driven living means knowing God's purpose before taking the first step. Whether someone is starting a family, a business, or a church, they should first understand what God is calling them to become. That idea became the foundation of Saddleback Church and later inspired one of the most influential Christian books ever published. In 2002, Warren released The Purpose-Driven Life, a book that encouraged readers to live for God's purposes through worship, service, fellowship, spiritual growth, and sharing their faith. The message reached far beyond the walls of Saddleback. The book has been translated into 137 languages, sold more than 50 million copies in different formats, and remains one of the best-selling nonfiction books in publishing history. But as Warren reminded the congregation, That worldwide influence began with something remarkably small. On March 30th, 1980, just 1 week before Easter, he stood inside a small theater at Laguna Hills High School. There was no large campus, no worldwide ministry, and no famous pastor standing on stage. Around 50 or 60 people gathered after receiving a simple letter announcing that a new church was beginning. Rick Warren did not personally know any of them. They were complete strangers. There was no building to call home, no membership list, no large budget, no impressive organization. As Warren openly admitted, they had no money, no members, no property, and almost nothing else. What they did have was a clear belief that God had given them a purpose. That conviction shaped every decision they made from the very first day. Instead of focusing on what they lacked, Warren focused on what God wanted the church to become. Looking back decades later, he told the congregation that knowing God's purpose mattered far more than having resources. The results eventually reached beyond anything those first attendees could have imagined. Saddleback Church grew into one of the largest and most influential churches in the world. Its ministry expanded into 197 countries, helping introduce tens of thousands of new believers to the Christian faith. As this final chapter approached, Warren had already announced that beginning in September, Pastor Andy Wood and his wife Stacy, formerly leaders of Echo Church in the San Francisco Bay Area, would become the new leaders of Saddleback's global ministry. Rick and Kay Warren would step away from leading the church they had started with only a handful of strangers more than 4 decades earlier. Yet on that final Sunday, Warren made it clear that his farewell was not centered on buildings, numbers, book sales, or global influence. It was about reminding people that every lasting legacy begins with faith, purpose, and a willingness to trust God before anyone else can see the outcome. By ending where everything began, Rick Warren showed that the message which started Saddleback Church in 1980 was still the message he wanted people to remember as he said goodbye to the role that defined much of his life. Before an end, there was a beginning. Where did Rick Warren start from? Keep watching to find out. The journey that built a global pastor. Long before Rick Warren stood before thousands at Saddleback Church or became one of the most recognized pastors in the world, he was simply a young boy growing up in Northern California. Born in San Jose, he was raised in the town of Ukiah in a home where faith was part of everyday life. His father, Jimmy Warren, served as a Baptist minister, while his mother, Dot, worked as a high school librarian. Together, they helped shape the values that would guide Rick for the rest of his life. Even as a teenager, Warren showed signs that he wanted to make his faith known. While attending Ukiah High School, he started the school's first Christian club. It was an early sign of the leadership skills that would later define his ministry. Rather than keeping his beliefs private, he wanted to create a place where other students could come together and grow in their faith. After graduating in 1972, Warren continued his education at California Baptist University in Riverside. It was there that he says his entire life changed. At just 19 years old, he believed God was calling him into full-time ministry. That sense of purpose only grew stronger after an unexpected experience that stayed with him for decades. In November 1973, Warren and a friend made a long drive of about 350 miles to San Francisco just to hear the well-known Baptist preacher W.A. Criswell speak. After the event, Warren patiently waited in line, hoping to shake Criswell's hand. What happened next surprised him. Instead of offering a quick greeting, Criswell stopped, looked directly at the young college student, placed his hands on him, and prayed over him. Warren later described that moment as deeply meaningful, believing it confirmed the calling he already felt in his heart. Determined to prepare himself, Warren continued studying theology. He earned a Bachelor of Arts from California Baptist University before enrolling at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. There, he completed his Master of Divinity in 1979. He later expanded his education by earning a Doctor of Ministry from Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. While attending seminary, Warren did much more than sit in classrooms. He worked at Texas Ranch for Christ, a ministry founded by evangelist Billy Hanks Jr. It was during this period that he discovered another passion: writing. Alongside Hanks and Wayne Watts, he co-authored books designed to help Christians better understand Scripture and grow in their faith. Those early writing experiences would later prepare him for something much bigger than he could have imagined. In January 1980, shortly after finishing his studies, Warren and his wife, Kay, opened their small Orange County condominium to 7 people for a Bible study. There were no large crowds, no church building, and no famous ministry. Just a handful of people gathering to study God's Word together. Only a few months later, on Easter Sunday in April 1980, Saddleback Church held its very first public worship service at Laguna Hills High School. Around 200 people attended that first gathering. It was a modest beginning, but it marked the start of something that would grow far beyond Southern California. As the years passed, the church expanded at an incredible pace. Before eventually building a permanent campus, Saddleback Church met in nearly 80 different locations. Each move reflected the steady growth of the congregation. Eventually, weekly attendance reached nearly 20,000 people, making Saddleback one of the largest churches in the United States. But Warren's influence did not stop at the church doors. As his books and teachings spread around the world, invitations began arriving from some of the most respected organizations on the planet. He spoke before the United Nations, addressed audiences at the World Economic Forum in Davos, met with leaders at the African Union, participated in discussions hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations, lectured at Harvard Kennedy School, delivered a TED Talk, and appeared at Time Magazine's Global Health Summit. His growing reputation placed him in conversations that reached far beyond traditional church circles. In 2005, Warren also made headlines within the Baptist community. Speaking during the Centenary Congress of the Baptist World Alliance, he openly said that the Southern Baptist Convention had made a mistake by withdrawing from the alliance years earlier. While acknowledging theological differences, he argued that Christians should still find ways to work together, rather than allowing disagreements to divide them completely. His national profile grew even larger during the 2008 presidential election. At Saddleback Church, Warren hosted the Civil Forum on the Presidency, bringing together Senators John McCain and Barack Obama for their first joint appearance as the Republican and Democratic presidential nominees. The nationally televised event focused on leadership, faith, and public service, drawing millions of viewers across the country. Only a few months later, President-elect Barack Obama selected Warren to deliver the invocation at his presidential inauguration. The decision sparked strong reactions from both supporters and critics because of Warren's well-known views on abortion and same-sex marriage. While some activist groups strongly opposed the choice, Obama defended his decision, saying that people with different beliefs should still be able to engage in respectful dialogue. When Warren finally gave the prayer during the inauguration, many observers praised its hopeful and unifying message. Warren continued expanding his ministry in different ways. In 2009, he partnered with Reader's Digest to launch Purpose-Driven Connection, a quarterly publication designed to encourage Christian readers through articles and multimedia resources. Although the magazine ended later that year because it struggled to attract enough subscribers, Warren continued reaching audiences through books, conferences, and speaking engagements. His international work also continued to grow. In 2010, he was invited to pray during the inauguration of Rwandan President Paul Kagame, and later became a member of the President's Advisory Council. More than a decade later, in 2023, Warren was named the first honorary chancellor of Spurgeon's College in the United Kingdom, recognizing his global influence in Christian leadership. That same year, however, he once again found himself at the center of controversy. After Saddleback Church was removed from the Southern Baptist Convention for appointing a woman as a teaching pastor, Warren publicly defended the ordination of women. His comments sparked another nationwide debate, showing that even after decades in ministry, he remained willing to speak openly on issues that divided many churches. By the time Rick Warren stepped away from leading Saddleback Church, his story had become far bigger than one congregation. From a teenager who started a small Christian club at school to a pastor whose voice reached presidents, world leaders, and millions of believers, his journey was marked by remarkable growth, unexpected opportunities, and moments that would continue shaping his legacy long after his final sermon. But how did his simple ideas become a worldwide movement that transformed churches? Stay tuned to find out. The message that reached the world. By the time Saddleback Church was growing rapidly, Rick Warren had already developed a way of teaching that many pastors wanted to learn. In the church's early years, ministers from different places began calling, writing letters, and visiting Saddleback to ask one simple question: how did this church grow so quickly while staying focused on its mission? Rather than keeping his ideas to himself, Warren welcomed those conversations. He spent countless hours explaining the principles that had guided Saddleback from the beginning. At the time, he did not think he was creating a worldwide movement. He was simply sharing lessons he had learned through experience, hoping they would help other churches become stronger. His ability to teach these ideas grew even further through his work with the Institute for Evangelism and Church Growth, a program connected to Fuller Theological Seminary. There, Warren had the opportunity to train pastors from different backgrounds, answer their questions, and refine his approach to ministry. The more he taught, the clearer his message became. That message eventually took the form of a book. In 1995, Zondervan published The Purpose-Driven Church. Instead of presenting complicated theories, Warren explained the practical lessons he had learned while building Saddleback Church from the ground up. The book began with what became known as the Saddleback Story, describing the church's humble beginnings before introducing the principles that shaped its growth. At the heart of the book were 5 simple purposes that Warren believed every healthy church should follow: worship, fellowship, discipleship, ministry, and evangelism. He argued that churches should not focus only on filling seats each Sunday. Instead, they should help people grow step by step in their relationship with God. Warren described this process as moving people from the crowd to the core. First, churches should reach people in their communities. They should welcome new believers, help them become committed members, encourage spiritual growth, equip them to serve, and send them to share their faith. The practical purpose-driven model spread rapidly across denominations. By 2004, more than 10,000 churches had attended Rick Warren's training events, making it a highly influential leadership movement. But Warren's vision extended beyond church attendance and organizational growth. Together with his wife, Kay, he wanted local churches to become active in meeting real human needs. In 2003, they launched the PEACE Plan, a humanitarian initiative that encouraged churches around the world to fight poverty, care for the sick, support education, strengthen local communities, and share the Christian faith through practical service. The program reflected Warren's long-standing belief that faith should not remain inside church buildings. He often challenged believers to become involved in solving problems affecting communities around the world. believing that churches could make a lasting difference when they worked together. As his influence expanded, public recognition followed. In 2004, Time magazine listed Rick Warren among the leaders who mattered most that year. Just 1 year later, the magazine included him on its prestigious list of the 100 most influential people in the world, placing him alongside political leaders, business executives, artists, and other global figures whose work was shaping society. The honors continued. In late 2005, U.S. News and World Report named Warren one of America's top 25 leaders, recognizing the growing impact of his ministry both inside and outside the church. The following year, Newsweek included him on its list of 15 people who make America great, highlighting his influence on faith, leadership, and humanitarian work. At the same time, another achievement was changing Warren's life forever. His 2002 book, The Purpose-Driven Life, had become far more than a successful publication. Readers around the world embraced its simple message about discovering God's purpose for their lives. Churches studied it together, families read it at home, and small groups built entire Bible studies around its lessons. By 2006, the book had sold more than 30 million copies, making Rick Warren a New York Times best-selling author. It was no longer just a Christian bestseller. It had become one of the most successful non-fiction books ever published, reaching millions of readers across different countries, cultures, and languages. Looking back, it is remarkable to think that these worldwide achievements grew out of conversations with a handful of pastors asking for advice. What started as one church sharing its experience eventually became a movement that influenced thousands of churches and millions of believers. It also transformed Rick Warren from a local California pastor into one of the most recognized Christian leaders of his generation. So, what do you think about Pastor Rick Warren's goodbye? Let us know in the comments section below. In the end, Rick Warren's story is one of humble beginnings, global influence, difficult controversies, and a remarkable farewell from the church he built. Whether you admire his leadership or question some of his decisions, there is no denying the lasting impact he has had on millions of lives around the world. His final message as senior pastor closed one chapter, but his legacy continues through the people and ministries he inspired. Like, subscribe, and join us for more remarkable stories behind the world's most influential faith leaders.